and gentlemen, welcome to Wrestling Art with Chris Things.
Ray! Do the hammerlock! I do the hammerlock! Ray! Do the hammerlock, you turkey necks! Yeah, do the hammerlock!
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what I believe is episode 7 of Wrestling Art with Chris Things. I am Chris Things, once again your host this week and every week, and this is our weekly Match of the Week edition of the show, where I do an art. I watch a match, and then I apparently, if I dig it enough, it becomes what I deem my Match of the Week. At such point, I make an art of it, and then we do this podcast where we talk about it. So that match for this week is a bloody doozy. Beautifully bizarre match, a meeting point of All Japan Kings Road and Enochiism and all of the great Pride FC kind of thing of DON FRYE challenging TOSHIAKI KAWADA for the Triple Crown, which I was just so bloody enthused about. But more about that later, and I'll have a special guest on the show to chat about that one. But to start with, I thought I'd jump into this as a little, letting you know what I got going on thing again that I did last week. So this week is probably a good one because I had something quite significant happen over the weekend. As a Brisbane-based artist, just as a bit of background, thus far in my arts career, I've primarily doing commissions, group art shows, solo art shows, all that kind of stuff. But I've never really done many in-person events before, like expo events, art markets, that kind of stuff. I kind of honestly thought like my art with the sort of weird wrestling culty kind of niche might not necessarily appeal to the masses in that sense, so I haven't really done that kind of thing. But then an expo came along that I thought, hey, this might be relevant. It's called the Oddities and Curiosities Expo. Now, this is actually a worldwide expo, I think mainly based in America, but this was the first time coming to Australia. And I thought, hey, oddities, curiosities, so that's kind of up my alley. I'd say my Hulk's kind of like a celebration of general oddities and weirdness. So yeah, I thought I'll throw my hat in the ring. We'll see how it goes. But so this past weekend, that was the event at the Brisbane Convention Centre. I had my first ever in-person expo event where I'm sitting at a stand, and I was going to be talking to a whole bunch of people about my art, selling my art, that whole kind of thing. But man, now that it's done, I just want to tell everyone that it was a bloody incredible experience. It honestly blew me away and blew away my expectations as well, to be honest. So I think I spoke last week. It was quite a bit to kind of prepare for this event and lining up all of the different things, but I got all that done. Bit of an update there. I mentioned the table runner last week, potentially maybe being mixed with some sort of milk or ice cream remnants, and a fear that my stand was going to smell like curdled milk. Crisis averted. Everything was okay there. But man, I just really want to say that it was just fantastic. The amount of interesting, cool people that I got to have great conversations with. Obviously also the amount of people that supported and bought things, and it just kept going. Like the Saturday was was just insane. But yeah, it was just amazing, and I want to say a huge thank you to everyone that came along, everyone that stopped by, everyone that had a chat, and everyone that supported this in a financial sense. I'm truly grateful. If any of you guys happen to be listening here, welcome to the show. It was awesome to see you. But yeah, I just honestly want to say that it meant so much to me. Because despite having these kind of uh bar solo shows and that kind of stuff, like they're cool, and sometimes I do get to have a bit of a chat with different people about my work there in those kind of environments, but nothing like this, where honestly I was seeing like thousands of people come past, check out my stuff, and I'm seeing them in front of my eyes, like them looking at my art and seeing their kind of judgment in a sense, like seeing their reaction before my eyes. I'm trying to be chill and just go about my business or whatever, be welcoming and everything like that, but it was so interesting to see people's reactions to looking at different stuff, but more than that, just the amount, it was so touching, hearing the amount of lovely things of what people were saying about my work, and what they liked about it, how it appealed to them, be that like the subject matter and the interest kind of thing, or more just my general style, and my colors and brushwork and line work and things like that. It was honestly amazing, and kind of overwhelming to hear, and I just wanted to make sure to talk about that, because this kind of thing, it's inspiring, honestly. So it inspired me to, obviously I was going to continue doing this thing anyway, but it gave me a little bit more juice, a bit more sustenance to keep it on going, because I was kind of shocked at how many people dug my stuff, I guess. And I don't say that to like toot my own horn in any sense. I definitely don't want to be like a big head kind of any gross things like that. If anything, I think a lot of the time I'm actually the opposite, and I can be very critical of myself and of my work. So just getting to hear those kind of compliments, and hearing that people did dig it, and seeing people dig it in like a real sense before my eyes, it was super nice and heartwarming, and yeah, I made me bloody I want to go out and do a heck of a lot more of these in-person events, I'll tell you that. So I think 2024 is going to be a big one for that. I got some exciting stuff to share for you all in the near future, of some cool things that I put together specifically for this show, that I'll then be able to add to my website and make available to y'all. But yeah, I just want to say, bloody what a special experience, and I really like just talking to people and interacting and that kind of thing. It was kind of a surprise to me how just how nice and how refreshing and how touching that whole process can be. But enough of that. That was a big thing for me for this weekend. I'll keep you all informed on more significant developments with the art things. But yeah, that's a little update for Chris things for this week. But yeah, exciting stuff in the works, I'll say that. But let's throw on to our special guest and talk about our match of the week. Here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have a gentleman on the line that I'm very excited to chat to. a man who is one half of, I would say, the leading New Japan Pro Wrestling English language podcast going. He is a very knowledgeable gentleman and a guy who I particularly have a lot of respect for his knowledge and appreciation for the history of shoot style professional wrestling. Just going to put that out there. But without any further ado, please welcome to the show the young boy, Josh Smith.
Hey, Chris. What an intro. The thing that you have left out was as soon as we got on Skype, for some reason the camera was centered on your dick. I don't know why.
I mean, I was wearing underwear. Look, we just want to put that out there. I mean, no pants, to be fair.
Oh man, but yeah, we haven't talked in so long. It's so good to hear from you.
Yeah, dude, I'm digging the mustache.
Oh yeah. My girlfriend, she, a couple months back, I wasn't trying to grow a beard per se. I just wasn't shaving, and it wasn't looking so good. And she was like, "Well, that part's pretty good. The rest is pretty crappy. Why don't you just nix that and keep that?" And I was like, "All right." So I've been rocking it for a bit now, and I think it looks okay.
Yeah, dig it, man. That's nice. My significant other has a disdain for my just solo mustache. I still had it when we first met, and then it was one of those things where it's like, you don't want to like change someone too fast, when you're first having met them. So I think she like bare with it for a bit of a while, and then I sometimes, the beard just grows back out of laziness, and she made sure to like give me the most amount of compliments, be like, "Oh, you look so much better with that beard."
Did you recently trim down the beard?
Yeah, I don't think it got quite as out of control as probably the last time you saw me where on my last regrow. So it hasn't been too nuts, but yeah, it's been semi-maintained, which feels weird for me.
Yeah, I saw a photo and I was like, man, he's got it groomed down. That's not quite the Bruiser Brody look I'm used to, but very very el guapo, if I may say.
Oh, thank you, 100% guapo.
Oh, you missed it, man. During the pandemic, I had hair all the way down to my mid back.
Yeah, I saw some pictures where it looked like you were growing the hair out. I didn't know it got that long.
Yeah, it was pretty long. But yeah, my girlfriend was like, never again. It looked terrible. So
Well, you're looking pretty guapo with the nicely groomed hair, the short hair. I think it works for you.
yeah.
Yeah, nice, man. Yeah. So you were like outside of the podcast stuff. Are you still wrestling?
I'm not currently wrestling. I do plan to go back to training here in the near future. Hopefully, I've been still like hitting the gym and just trying to improve my physical fitness. But I've been focusing more on my like shoot career.
Ooh.
Yeah, trying to shore up that sort of thing, and it became untenable to balance, taking bumps and studying for tests all at the same time. So,
Yeah.
maybe once I finish all my testing for my financial career, I might be able to go back. But I don't know what the state of the school. I was training at Matt Seidel's school,
Yeah.
and I know Matt's still training, but I think he's working alongside Jay Lethal at his school. And most of my training partners that were like, like more seasoned, they've all kind of gone on to do other things in the wrestling world. So I don't think there's technically a school for me to go back to like there was before.
Right. So is Jay's one still based in Florida?
It is. I've never been there. I have friends that have trained there, but I without saying too much, I think it's a kind of ran differently than what I'm used to as far as like Matt's approach and
Right.
that sort of thing. So hoping to work with Matt again in the future, but we'll see.
Yeah, cool, man. It is such a hard thing to juggle. Like, it really seems like, at least from my days doing it, you have to be. I mean, and that's obviously very different. Like fucking the world of Australian wrestling, but even doing that, you have to like commit, kind of like everything to do it well, kind of thing. Or, it's just such a hard thing to try to juggle with like real life too. So I definitely get that. I mean, for me, like personally with this art stuff, this I was only able to do this after hanging up the boots. You know, like when I was still wrestling, I just like, you know, it's work and then wrestling, and it was just they were the only two things I had time for. You know, so then after finishing that, that's only how I was able to kind of like, oh man, I used to love doing this art thing. So why don't I transfer the passion from, you know, the actual wrestling into making art and mostly art of wrestling, as it funnily enough ended up. But yeah, it's definitely hard to juggle. But and then the same thing then happened again with the art stuff and work. So then that's where I finally had like a big, you know, tricky kind of like decision to make of like that jumping off platform of going from like the shoot job into like the passion job kind of thing. So I was working in like marketing, and then I ended up sort of, making a big decision. Like, you know what, I'm going to try going all in on this like art shit. So yeah.
Well, now you're back on the Social Suplex Podcast Network, so that's gonna supplement the big bucks roll in here, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
we actually do have some money coming in, but it's nothing crazy. I'll have to go over those numbers here in the next few days, and you know, get you guys paid.
That's all right, man. Everything counts. I always said from the old Grown Men Watch This Shit podcast, I think the coolest thing I ever got out of it was that sweet ball shaver sponsorship that we had where we got the free packs. That was rad. I was like, man,
my man, what is it, the lawnmower 3.0? My one of the attachment broke off, so I hit them up and I was like, can you guys send me a new one? And they're like, they were trying to sell me stuff, and I'm like, dude, you guys gave this to me as a podcaster. I just need the little attachment. Just send me a replacement. Then they did.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I went through a few of the replacement razors through it, so it's been good. I still use that like fancy leather bag that they gave us.
Yeah, me too.
The perks of podcasting, ladies and gentlemen. It's just fucking rad. But yeah, dude, I've actually had a really fun time getting back into the podcasting kind of thing. It was weird, like it kind of with the Grown Men Watch This Shit podcast, it just kind of like organically dropped off, I guess. And kind of COVID, I think, was a big part of it. Because I think, you know, there was like a lot less wrestling going on, and I think everyone was kind of like just bummed out and in a sort of depressed slump for the most part during that time. So I just kind of like organically came to a stop. And then I was like, man, I really miss doing this thing. And I was like, what could I do that's like new and maybe more me, I guess? And that's where I had the idea for this wrestling art one. But it's been super fun so far.
I've been enjoying this show. I've been enjoying the work that you've been putting out. I will tell you though, as a fan of the Grown Men Watch This Shit podcast, there are two bits that I miss. That
I think I'm thinking I know what you're gonna say, but please go on.
The first one is David Arquette watch or David Arquette alert.
Yes.
There'd be like a siren that came on.
This was the only just for our listeners that may not be caught up for this, we had a good run where we were just so fascinated with David Arquette's return to the wrestling scene that we covered this like hawks. And every time there was something happening with David Arquette, well, then it became just a thing on every episode where even if there wasn't something happening, we'd like kind of, I don't know, say that.
I remember what it was now. You guys would be like, beep, 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 beep.
That was it. So much love for David Arquette. My one regret with the podcast is that we were never able to get David Arquette on the show, but you know, we got
RJ City on. You could have easily gotten David, but the other thing is old news.
What even was that? I can't even remember.
You guys only did it for like 2 weeks, but you guys would start talking about shit that was like really old, and you're like, this is news that's old. Old news.
Man, the amount of nonsense that we did on that podcast is so much fun. I mean, and that still continues to this day. And also, you know, I'm doing this kind of revolving door thing for these match of the week episodes. So super stoked to have you on. But looking to, you know, semi-regularly bring Jeremy back into the fold. So we kind of get a bit of that like grown men watch that shit. You know, vibe going on. So yeah, it's been fun, man. But I'm very pleased to hear that you are so nostalgic for our previous train wreck of a podcast. Yeah, man. So I guess we've got a match to talk about here. So I watched this because I saw it shared in by, you know, that Vintage Puro account on Twitter. They always share so much rad shit, and they shared this, and it was weird because I think it was a match that may have been kind of like on my radar in a vague sense. Like maybe I knew that it happened, but I never really like looked into it or watched it or anything. And I just watched this, like, you know, GIF highlight of the match that they posted, and I was like, this looks fucking rad as shit. How have I never actually gotten around to watching this? So the match for everyone listening, Toshiaki Kawada versus fucking Don FRYE, of all people, in All Japan, Budokan Hall, October 26th, 2003. But yeah, I was like, this looks fucking amazing. And then I fired it up and watched it, and it was like one of those things, you know, sometimes you watch something in kind of GIF form and it kind of doesn't quite live up.
Right. Yeah.
I fucking thought this definitely was everything I was possibly hoping for. Like I said, from the like big fucking manly blows, big kicks, like the sweet grappling at the start, and just the overall idea that this was like Don Frye's one and done in All Japan. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he'd just come off of that fucking incredible Takayama match in Pride the year prior. I think he might have had a couple of losses after that. Maybe did a little bit in New Japan again. I'm not quite sure on the timeline there, but came in basically to All Japan to have this one challenge for the Triple Crown and then head out. And I could see, like, anyone else, if they're doing that, they're just cashing that paycheck. You know, they're just like cashing it in, putting in like the least possible effort for this match. But I thought this was like the exact opposite of that. He was like going like all out, so giving as well, I thought, to Kawada too. But yeah, man, fucking loved it. What did you think?
Yeah, I was very, very you know, delighted that this was the match you picked for me. You know, most of my historical knowledge is gonna, like you mentioned, revolve more around like shoot style Puroresu and then like New Japan stuff. And I've watched my fair share of All Japan, obviously. I actually, to be quite frank, I think most of my All Japan viewing more so is like 1980s and 70s All Japan
Awesome.
than it is like 90s, even though I know that that's like the, you know,
the sort of glory period.
Right.
But I mean, I agree with you that 70s and 80s stuff is fucking incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, this match was just so interesting to me because it's a melding of different worlds. Like you've got, you know, Don Fry, who is, you know, not just an MMA legend, but like, you know, UFC tournament winner, UFC ultimate champion, and then a guy who'd been, you know, wrestling extensively since like 96, 97, but spent most of that time in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Like you mentioned, he'd never been to All Japan. So the idea that he came over in 2003 is kind of crazy. And he did have one other All Japan match in
Yeah, a bit
2013. It's
later
a
on,
tag
right?
match. Yeah. But this was his only major main event. And this was, to my understanding, it's the last Budokan Hall anniversary show that they ever did. So it's a big time match. And, you know, for Kawada, he's kind of in the middle of that period where business is kind of going down because of the Noah exodus, and they're kind of in that transitional period where the company's being kept afloat by him and Tenru and Muto and different guys from outside groups and companies coming over to kind of assist them. But Kawada had won the Triple Crown title up to this point, but he'd always been snake bit by either, short title reigns where he had to drop the belt to bigger stars or injuries that kind of plagued him.
I think prior to this, he had the knee injury and he had to vacate, and then they had the tournament to crown the new Triple Crown champion.
Tenryu won that, right?
I thought. At least I know that Kawada's current reign, like this reign we were talking about, he won a tournament where I think he got a big victory over Otani in the finals, I believe. And then so this becomes his first defense, I believe, of the Triple Crown after winning it back. And then he would go on, with this reign to set the actual record, to break Misawa's record of the Triple Crown reign. And I think it still holds the record today, though it was met by Kento Miyahara. I think he sort of got up to the same amount of defenses, but he couldn't break it, which I really did.
Yeah. Well, he held it for over 500 days, so it's a really, really legendary title reign. And like you mentioned, this is the first defense. And when I was trying to look up and see like how did they even tap Don Frye to be the guy, and it looks like the connection through Muto was the reason that they had that connect to get him in for this big match.
Right, because they were part of that faction in New Japan between like Black New Japan and that Bat thing.
Something. Yeah, I was saying earlier that Bat, I think that was Badass Translate Trading was the group's name. And speaking of that the Makai Club, I know how you feel about Murakami, so
fucking god, man. Big fan of Murakami. But I mean, that brings to like an interesting thing to. So what we're talking about, like you said, this sort of philosophical meeting point of this match, right? Like the All Japan Kings Road history meets like that like full-on Enochiism period. And again, like a lot of those kind of people that are like, oh man, Enochiism, that's like what almost killed New Japan, right? Before fucking Jado and Gato saved it. But I mean, there's something that is rad about Enochiism. I don't know. It's like, I don't know if it's like now is as much of a controversial take. It seems like there's a lot more people that dig that kind of like fusion that happened of shoot style and pro wrestling. What do you think?
it depends on what circles you are, kind of navigating in. I mean, to me, as a wrestling historian, kind of appreciating, pre 1920s historical wrestling and shoot style and Lancashire and all this stuff. I like the idea of shoot style kind of harkening back to what pro wrestling was before it became, kind of more show business esque. So I've never had a problem with it. There's definitely, I mean, we could go on all night about Enochiism and the issues and things that were bad and the things that were good. But one thing that struck me about this match, this has got to be the best Don Frye match I've ever seen. Better than pretty much everything I saw of him in New Japan up to this point. And kind of reminded me of why I love shoot style, where you can see, like, for instance, you watch a blood sport show and there's some matches where the guys are really great martial artists and they're doing basically a rolling expo, but they don't know how to work an actual match. And then you have sometimes where they'll have the wrong style guy in there and they know how to do pro wrestling, but they don't know how to mix in the actual realism of it all. And it's beautiful when you have a guy like, for instance, John Moxley on those shows, who is, I wouldn't say he's the greatest shooter in the world, but he's smart enough to know how to intertwine these things to make it all work together in the context of a pro wrestling match.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what Don Frye was doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a thing to consider with Don Fry as well. I actually was like a little bit blown away. I didn't know this personally, but he was trained up for professional wrestling by Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, and Brad Renigans. So that's sort of like classic, like AWA, like Vern kind of like wrestling knowledge. I mean, and that's the
Never
same
heard this.
dudes that train Brock, right?
Yeah, I've never heard that. This is the first time I'm learning something on this show for real.
Amazing. But yeah, I mean, if you're trained by dudes that are that fucking good,
Yeah.
and especially like Brad, like that dude is such underrated, like in general from the glimpses that I've seen of him, his actual wrestling, but then also everything you hear about the guys that he's taught. Yeah, I guess it's not that much of a surprise that that Don Fry was so good so fast. I'd say like in terms of your proper like big name mixed martial artists to make that crossover, I gotta think the guys that I mean outside of your Volk Han, but like you dudes like I mean between Don Fry or Bas Rutten,
Hmm.
both of those dudes I thought are tremendous in terms of how fast they got it, and yeah, you see that like wrestling IQ and that sort of ability to merge the working with the making it look as tight as possible in this match, and also like I definitely want to give the flowers to Kawada in this because I feel like he does a really good job of that fusion too. I guess going back to like he had some rad matches in the 90s with a bunch of your kind of big name shoot style dudes, some just fucking classic matches. So maybe it's that kind of like continuation of his experience there, but I just thought this worked together so well.
Yeah. I speaking of the outside guys that were good, you know who I think was the best, but didn't necessarily stick around to achieve as much as he could, but Kevin Randleman's probably, in my opinion, the
Oh man,
yeah, Kevin Randleman was so good when he came over. It's kind of nuts. But the thing with
I saw a little bit of his hustle stuff, and that dude looked like he just had so much untapped potential. I
yep.
was like, so sad that he didn't do more.
Yeah. As far as Kawada though, everybody has their favorites when it comes to the pillars. But one thing that I think Kawada did better than either Mizawa or Kobashi is work well with outsiders who took him outside of his comfort zone. I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
as good as both of them were, I don't think that they excelled at that as much as Kawada did. And he had to do a lot of that in this, time frame of All Japan's history, and he did it really well. And
Yeah.
there's so much I love about this match. Like I love Don Fry coming down to the ring with I don't know if you noticed he had Shudo gloves on, um,
Mm-hmm.
which was pretty cool. Like that's just another little pro wrestling nod. But he brought an extra pair of gloves and tosses it at the beginning of the match to Kawada, and Kawada just fucking throws it over. He's like, "I'll break my fist if I want to."
I love that so much.
And then, the early stanzas of the match is really a story of Kawada working pro wrestling maneuvers, but also primarily kicking the hamstrings of Don Fry, trying to ground
Mm.
him and kind of keep distance. Whereas Don Fry in the clinch dominates Kawada with
Oh, those
punches
knees.
and knees and headbutts, and it's really vicious. The first 10 minutes of this match slash fight are pretty much as visceral as you're going to see from anything else from that period, really.
Yeah, I absolutely love the early goings of this, and I I really dig Kawada's. I mean, I always love Kawada's selling. That's one of the
Hmm.
all-time, great kind of things. It's so funny that people are like, they're making out that he's like a no-sell kind of guy, but that you saw that so well in this match where Don Fry is like lighting him up with I mean through this part and then with some of those punches. And you see early on Kawada's kind of like, no selling them to a point. And then he does that amazing, just all time great, like Kawada kind of like delayed like
bumble
stumble.
delay, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so watching this for your show, I wasn't just watching it through the eyes of a Perezu fan, but I was also trying to think of like the artistic side of things. And
Oh, cool.
I saw where you took the still,
Mm-hmm.
and actually I saw that before I watched the fight. The one thing with your artistic liberty,
Mm.
Kawada's eyes look in your photo like they're completely swelled up. So I was like, oh shit, did he get like his but it wasn't quite that way in the actual match. But the
No,
point where
I
you
mean, there's a thing. What I'll say on that.
yeah,
With certain guys, there's certain like distinctive features I find that you kind of need to focus in on, almost like similar to like a caricature kind of deal.
right.
That like to me, sort of gets across the visual of a guy.
Mhm.
And for me, a big thing of Kawada is he's all those big old like saggy like under eye bags kind of thing where he looks
Right.
like he hasn't slept for like a week.
Right.
um Mixed with like obviously the just always looking like just apathetic and not happy or excited in the slightest. But yeah, I think the exaggeration of the looking like he's got two swollen eyes was probably more to do with trying to capture that.
Sure. And the moment that you took was actually the result of one of those delayed sellings where
Mm,
Kawada gives a big boot to Don Fry. Don Fry hits the ropes, comes forward, hits him with a big right straight, and while Kawada's going down, kind of tries to throw like a late Inzaguri like simultaneously, and then they're both laid out, and then
yeah.
and then the one who sits up first is Kawada, like off of the
Mm,
Inzaguri. And I was like, man, what a great like little spot to capture, the exhaustion, because honestly, from that point on, it's almost all Kawada the rest of the match.
mm,
Down the stretch, Don Fry really doesn't get a lot more offense. He kind of gets his ass kicked like the last 4 or 5 minutes of the match. But
yeah.
there were definitely times where I was watching it and I was like, if I was, and I do dabble, I don't, broadcast it, and I'm nowhere near as talented as you, but like I used to draw when I was younger, and I was like, if I was gonna draw, like what spot would I choose? And there was one.
Oh, this is interesting. Please tell me. I love this kind of stuff.
Well, I'm a big fan of in the 90s, especially with like Pancrase and the early UFCs where you'd see like the dueling leg locks. And there was one point
Oh
where
yeah.
um, Don Fry tried to transition from an arm bar into a knee bar, and then he got caught into a toe hold by Kawada, and they didn't have the right angle. But if they just had
Mm,
the right angle, I feel like that would have been maybe like where you could see both of their faces. It might have been a really cool thing to capture. But what I
yeah.
loved about that spot is where Don Fry is selling so well, and he's desperately trying to get to the ropes, and he grabs the leg of the referee and he starts dragging himself forward.
Oh, so good.
And I was like, if you had the right angle, that would be another optimum like spot to draw.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of those kind of moments where I'll pause it and almost go like frame by frame to be like, all right,
Mhm.
what do we got here to deal with? And yeah, it's like a lot of the time just sort of unfortunate where he just like, oh man, I just so wish the camera got in there a little bit closer or whatever. So I mean, there is a little bit where, like I said, you kind of can do a little bit of liberties kind of thing to
Mhm.
focus in on something. But there is a point where I try to, at least in terms of like, it's important to me that if people see this and then they watch the match, that they can be like, oh, that was the moment, like you're saying. So I don't want to fuck with it or tweak it too much.
Right.
But no, I dig that you that particular moment stood out to you, man. Were there any others where you thought, oh, this could be a contender?
I mean, down the stretch when you have Kawada putting Don Fry in the stretch plum
Hmm.
and him basically getting choked out from that. That could have been a potential, but you would have missed out on getting Don Fry's beautiful mustache at that point.
And that is very important to me. Don Frye's glorious moustache needed to be captured here. Yeah, I actually thought the same thing, funnily enough. I was like watching the stretch plum. Well, there was another moment where I think Don, there was a really cool visual, but Don's moustache was like had the rope covering it or something like that. But yeah, it's quite funny the little details and things like that when you're going through. But yeah, I mean, getting back to the match, like you mentioned that on that finishing stretch, it's just kind of like Kawada eating Don up,
Yeah.
which definitely happens to a degree. There are a few high points where I thought, I think Don got like some comebacks, and he maybe got a near fall or two. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he definitely got something on that finishing stretch where it was kind of like a great kind of like finishing flurry, but then Kawada just was like, got back control of it again.
I was gonna say, I honestly think he might have just been gassing out, to be honest. I don't think he was used to going 20 minutes in a wrestling match like that.
This was his longest match, at least singles match up to that point by far, I'm quite certain. I mean, like the Inoki one went, what, 4 minutes?
Don't get me started on the Inoki retirement. Oh my god.
Not the best match that you'll see Don Frye in, but I did rewatch that in the lead up to this just to get a bit of a refresher. Still not a big fan of that match, but less said about that the better. But yeah, I mean that could be a thing for sure. But I actually was thinking about it, and because I read like the cage match kind of reviews for this kind of stuff too, and see other people's thoughts or like anyone that's comment on Reddit or whatever. And I did see like a few people being like, "Oh, it would have been better if it wasn't, so one-sided. If it wasn't more just like Kawada kicking Don's ass." But I mean, I think early on, definitely I wouldn't say it was like just a one-sided squash in any sense, by Kawada.
Sure.
I definitely think it was like to and fro. And then, yeah, obviously as we go down the finishing stretch, it was more just like Don gets overwhelmed by Kawada. But I was actually quite fascinated by that, comparing it to kind of current wrestling. Because it's such a different tempo, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Like, so much of the time, wrestling almost gets like trapped into, or like modern wrestling, into the same kind of tropes, the same kind of match structure, the same kind of like, we go to the finishing sequence and it's just like big move, near fall, blah, 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 and then you finish on that real big, total high. But like most of the time fights don't go like that. And I find it really interesting that playing with a bit of a different thing where it's like the story of this was almost like, both guys were hard to finish. And then you had Don like, with the last kind of flurry, and then he just gets overwhelmed, and then it's kind of like a series of things from that point on, getting into the stretch plum, and then it takes a while for that, and then he eventually gets it on the second time, I think, and finishes him off with it. But yeah. I just thought it was quite interesting and fascinating, like the different tempo from that perspective, and honestly, it kind of felt a bit refreshing.
And I mean, to me, I still looked at it through the eyes of like trying to understand basic match structure, and I don't think it really even truly deviated that far from what you'd expect. Obviously, stylistically it did, but from a layout standpoint, I mean, Kawada controlled the early parts. He got the heat, the comeback and the shine and all that was Don Frye, and then down the stretch, he gets cut off and then kind of dominated, and that's kind of where they start going to their finish. And he gets some hope spots, but they made Kawada look strong. Part of me was thinking the story down the stretch for me is as and maybe this is headcanon, but it seemed like Kawada was having trouble putting Don Frye away, so Don was showing his resiliency.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the story might have needed to be, especially to establish Kawada as the true kingpin and ace of this company that's, definitely having tough time business wise to just establish Kawada as a badass. And what better way to do that than to have him literally, choke unconscious one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it was definitely the way I saw it, kind of like a story of like struggle and resilience and just manly shit. But
Right.
um,
Some of those punches from Kawada.
oh man, I love it. It's so those big girl like soup bone kind of punches. It almost reminds me a
Mhm.
bit of like the Necro Butcher punches.
Except better. Less flailing.
A little bit. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying business wise does make a lot of sense too, because if you look at it, this is the start, early portion of what would go on to be a, incredible run. And obviously they're getting Don in for this one show to, obviously have like a great match, but I think it's important to be making Kawada look as strong as possible. So I think that probably makes a lot of sense in hindsight when you're looking at it and thinking the reason why it did end up being such like a strong domination for Kawada in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I mean, the crazy thing about it when we talk about worlds colliding is at the very tail end of the match. As soon as it's over, you got Hashimoto and the 0-1 crew like storming the ring, which I'm like, what? This happened?
And then we went on to get that Hashimoto title challenge with the Triple Crown, which I think I might need to rewatch that one. I remember watching it initially and I wasn't that gassed up about it, but maybe with my current eyes I'll like it a bit better.
But yeah, I thought the match was great. I really enjoyed it, and I thought that the art that you did there to kind of just capture the exhaustion and the struggle that they had was, I think you picked the right moment for sure, and I thought it was really really well done, honestly. And I was like kind of, I was like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, the one where he's like, pointing at the screen because he recognized it. I was like, that was me looking for that spot.
Amazing. Yeah, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood one.
Yep.
That's rad. Yeah, thanks so much, man. I appreciate that. I'm really having a lot of fun with this kind of match of the week series thing. It's kind of a good challenge, but also I think as I'm going on with it, it's making me try to be a bit more creative and try to capture different interesting kind of visuals of matches or ones that are really distinctive. So I think that's what I was kind of going for here. So I really appreciate it,
Couple
man.
couple last things before we go. One thing I also wanted to point out is, the old adage when it comes to Kings Road versus Strong Style. They always say that like Strong Style is offense first, and Kings Road was more defense first, and that might account for some of the idiosyncrasies when it comes to the way that, like, say, some of the New Japan versus UWFI matches played out versus the way Kawada approached that sort of match with Don Fry. And I personally, and I mean, I might be a little bit of a traitor here, but I kind of prefer the idea that Kawada took everything that Don Fry could dish out at him, gassed him out, and then kept going and then tapped the motherfucker out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is definitely quite true to that Kings Road style as well in terms of the escalation that we saw and that kind of like build. Um, but yeah, it's such an interesting thing, the idea of like I mean, you can talk all day about the New Japan Strong Style
Mhm.
versus Kings Road, kind of different approach of in ring and match structure and all that kind of stuff, your psychology. But yeah, this is definitely my preference to any of the other like Don Fry New Japan matches that you're saying. So yeah,
Did you
credit to Kawada.
Are you doing the intro that you did for last week's show for this episode?
I am indeed.
Okay, yeah, I listened to last week's episode and I just wanted to say I thought that was a really great addition and kind of gave some good insight. And you know, obviously we're talking a lot about the match here as opposed to, entirely about the art, but I think that was a really good idea for you to incorporate that in the show, and I think it's a good thing to keep going, honestly.
Oh, cool. Thanks so much, man. Yeah, I'm definitely planning on keeping it going. Yeah, I agree. I think like I said last week, sometimes you just get talking all about the match and then I kind of like forget about the art side of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think almost like treating it a little bit like a kind of personal journal is just kind of interesting for people. I've just spoken about in the intro to this one, sort of a massive Expo event that I did over the weekend. That was like my first ever one. So definitely some interesting tidbits there if you want to re-listen. But yeah, man, really cool being able to kind of like share this with people, I guess, as well, because it's like, I don't know, this whole art thing and art career can be a fucking scary time. So it's kind of good to be able to share it with people.
We take 1% of whatever you made at that expo, just so you know. So,
oh, of course. Everyone wants to dip their hand in the bucket. That's all right. I get it. Yeah, man. No, thank you. Yeah, definitely continuing that on, and yeah, we'll see where this goes. Planning on more of our artist interview series. In the future, I got a great one that I'm just kind of like herding in a couple of really cool artists actually that I'm just talking with. So we'll have them on in the near future. But then also I'm kind of looking at branching out a little bit to be doing some wrestler chats on the show. So especially like workers who have a great eye for the art side and the creative side of what we do in professional wrestling in a merchandising sense or whatever. So I think it's interesting, and obviously I'm sort of talking about it from like an artist illustrator perspective, same with a lot of the artists that I'm talking to. I think there's an interesting side of it looking at from a worker perspective. And especially like these guys that commission so many different really talented artists for different merch and things like that. So yeah, that'll be something to look forward to too.
Well, let's not forget, in the annals of this show's history, when it all is said and done, I was the first worker that ever came on as a guest.
You are, man, for sure. Oh, I mean, technically, hang on, I don't want to step on any toes here, but we did have a masked wrestling fish turned hardened criminal Australian worker on the show the other week. So I mean, but you're the first one from North America.
Okay, yeah, the first North American worker.
Yeah, oh man, that's definitely funny. Marked down in the history books. Thanks so much, definitely. Man. I really enjoyed this, and I'd love to have you back sometime in the near future. There's no way that I can avoid. It's coming at some point in this Match of the Week series. There's got to be some fucking UWF Reborn, UWFI, Pancrase, Rings, it's happening at some point, and like, who better?
Do you follow the Katugi Road guys from Quebrada?
Yeah.
Yeah, their shit's sick. They have an awesome project going that anyone who's listening, if you're interested in shoot style, look up Katugi Road. Those guys are pretty incredible. But yeah, man, I mean, anytime you want to do something shoot style based, if you want to jump into some crazy Memphis, 1980s lucha, no holds barred, or I guess we could always talk about New Japan.
I mean, hey, if I'm who else would be better to discuss a rad Murakami match than yourself?
Sure. Well, I guess is this the part where I should plug my show?
Yeah, please plug the things, my friend.
So anybody that's listening, many of you may already know me from my podcast because it's on this network. But if you are a listener and you're not familiar, come check us out. It's Keeping It Strong Style. We're a weekly episodic New Japan long form podcast. We usually go about 3 hours, cover everything that's going on in the world of New Japan that week. And it is to my knowledge, the longest running weekly episodic New Japan podcast on the internet today. So, we have a blast, and come check us out. It's a really good show, if I do say so myself.
I would back that up myself 100%. Big fan of the show, man.
Awesome. Well,
I have one last thing to ask
okay,
you. I'm very
sure.
intrigued. As a New Japan podcaster, there was some news that came out yesterday that kind of broke my heart a little bit in the New Japan sphere. You may know what I'm about to talk about here, but there was a belt that we're talking about reintroducing. I think a lot of us were hoping that they were finally bringing back the Intercontinental Championship, that,
Sure.
Nakamura did great things as matches with Ibushi. So much beautiful history with that belt. And then it just kind of got merged together to be that New Japan World Championship, and kind of disappeared. And a lot of us were thinking, oh, they're bringing it back. This would make a lot of sense. And then no, instead we get the IWGP Global Championship. I just quickly wanted to see your thoughts on this situation.
Well, Chris, if you'd been listening to Keeping It Strong Style, you would know that they'd already confirmed it was definitely never going to be the IC title. They had said that from the outset. But I definitely understand why people thought that. I thought maybe that's where they were headed. And once they clarified they were not reintroducing the IC title, I kind of started wondering what it could possibly be. And my thoughts was it could be anything other than a world title, but they're naming it global. I mean, the globe is a map of the world. Is the world and the globe
Hmm.
not the same thing? Like, what are we doing here? I was actually kind of hoping that it would be like something similar to like the OPBF, like the Oceanic Pacific Boxing Federation, because they're talking about trying to market and move more into like Oceania and South Asia and Central Asia, and
Mhm.
kind of have more shows over there. So I was like, maybe it's something more regionally specific to that part of the world, but apparently it's global, which, to me, that just screams like in a couple of years, they're going to have to merge the global and the world title, because they're both world titles. And it's a farce. It sucks that they're doing that, honestly. Hopefully it's a
It
white
just seems
strap. So
like
it's
so messy.
bro, so much in New Japan over the last few years has been so messy. Like, no lie whatsoever.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's like it's just a world title called something else. And if anything, to me, it would have made more sense for what they're going for to call it Intercontinental. If you're meant to, but I mean, if that's not what they want to do, fine.
I would have been perfectly happy if they said it was the Japanese Heavyweight Championship or something, something that I don't know,
Hmm.
just anything other than this would have been better. But best case scenario, they'll probably put it on a white strap, so it will be a spiritual successor to the IC belt. Maybe it'll facilitate that same similar role.
Well, hopefully we get that. But yeah, I mean, on the other hand, like the national title, I thought what Noah has going far better in terms of having an identity and a differentiation.
I agree, except for all the times that they've gone to 60-minute draws with that and the GHC title.
I mean, I do want to say that I bloody loved those 60-minute draws. So let's put that out there. But let's get over to my own plug skis. So obviously, big thank you to the Social Suplex Podcast Network. You can check that out at socialsuplex.com. In addition to Wrestling Art, there's a whole bunch of other rad podcasts on there, including that of this gentleman, Keeping It Strong Style, the premier New Japan podcast in the industry, I would say. We also have One Nation Radio, All Things Elite, a variety of other stuff. So get on there, have a little look. Follow those guys on Twitter as well, at Social Suplex. You can also, while you're there, if you're not already, please be following Chris Things. All the updates of the show on there. Also, Chris Things on Instagram, the best place to keep up with all of my art skis, all of my stuff I got going on, and last but not least, christhings.com.au, the best place for you to be able to buy my shit. But also just take a look. I do write-ups for all the artwork, so if there's one that you like and you just want to know a little bit of the backstory of it, even do that. But in addition to the original artworks, prints, they got all sorts of other stuff, calendars, mugs, some shirt skis, and just to the wise, I will have some fresh new t-shirt designs on there in the very near future. Stay tuned for that. But yeah, I think this has been a pretty fun episode. A little housekeeping note for y'all. Last week I said stay tuned for our next wrestling art curator episode. Things have been a little bit crazy, to be honest, with the Expo that we spoke about earlier and some other exciting commission stuff that I've got going on. So I'm still trying to wrangle up our next guest for the wrestling art curator side of things. Very exciting wrestling artists out there that I am going to be just so excited to chat with. So I can't wait to bring those to you. Stay tuned for that, as well as I mentioned, maybe some wrestler interviews. We'll see how that goes. But no, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for your time. I always appreciate it so much. And for making this the premier wrestling art podcast in the industry. maybe the only one, but no one needs to know. All right. Thanks a bunch, guys, and I will see you next week. Bye.
I do the hammer